It feels weird being back. I feel like we're on a first date or something. Ooh. This is a bow tie that Michael from Australia sent to my P.O. box. And I will not lie to you, I am on a quest to get as many free bow ties as I can. Does that make me a bad person? Bubba beer in a chat, bubba beer in a chat. There's a lot of burping in this video. Hello YouTube, so I usually do not spend more than one video on a certain topic, but the conversation from the Spectrums video was so good that I just cannot help myself. Can't stop, won't stop with the Spectrums up in her. Plus that is what this channel is all about, not just sparking a conversation, but also participating in one, addressing other perspectives, revising opinions, and acknowledging and validating everyone who contributed to the discourse. That being said, next video we're gonna switch gears and talk about something else. So do not worry if you are over this conversation. But until then, if you haven't seen the first Spectrums video, schwa, you might want to click it so you have all the context you need in order to understand this one. Don't worry. I'm gonna wait here till you check it out. Because let's be real, I don't want to recap the first one. This video is gonna be long enough already. Schwa, cool. Now that I am confident that you have seen part 1 of spectacular Spectrum stuff, we can continue. Let me just start off by saying, wow, y'all sent in over 100 maps that blew my mind. Some were simple, crafty, hilarious, some had TARDISes all over them, some were all on one side, all on the other side, all over. You played with color, shape, size, definition of endpoints. You omitted a spectrum if it didn't relate to you, you added a spectrum if it was important to your identity, and you critiqued the inclusion or meaning of some spectrums if you thought they were flawed, and I thought that it was all phenomenal. I will drink to that. And what I love the most is that so many of you were unafraid to bend the rules of your map in order to make it your own, and that is what I want to talk about. Confession, when I was first introduced to this model of expression, there were no brackets, no bars, only points, just dots. That's how I knew it, that's how I learned it to be, and so that was how I was planning on presenting it to you. But when I went to actually make my map, it didn't feel right, so on the spot I invented the bracket. I just decided that that was something I could do. And what was so cool about this is that, to my surprise, so many of you followed suit and had at least one bracket on your map too. Some of you even shaded your chart, your entire chart, corner to corner. And I love that. I mean, how cool. I guess that just goes to show how fluid so many people are. And like me rejecting the idea of solely using dots on my chart, other people were quick to critique different spectrums they thought were flawed. Some of the most interesting critiques surrounded the concept of gender expression, and I loved it. In fact, JD was so articulate, I'ma let him speak for himself.
So I express myself in the arts more. And that's cool. If you like poetry, that's awesome. It doesn't matter what gender you are. If you like to dance, that's awesome. It doesn't matter what gender you are. If you like to paint, if you like to knit, if you like to sew, if you like to design, that's awesome. It doesn't matter what gender you are. You do what makes you happy. I don't like the term gender expression just because, oh, you're doing that, okay, you must feel like a girl. I like to cook. Does that make me a woman? Sometimes when I'm out in public, I'll end up sitting like this. Does that make me a woman?
I put man and woman as the endpoint of many of these spectrums in order to create kind of a reference point and give the spectrum meaning, but what do man or woman really mean? Those terms could certainly have different definitions depending on who you ask. I suppose I was using society's traditional definitions of these terms, but should we really have to define ourselves around what society thinks correct gender roles are? Things to think about. I also got a ton of question marks on maps, and I think that's tight. There is such an unfortunate stigma around not being solid in your identity. People think you're young, confused, immature, going through a phase, but that is simply not true. Question marks simply mean that you are open to the fact that you still have a lot to learn about yourself, and you are secure and self-aware enough to admit that. To the haters. So throw on those question marks. You would be surprised how many people are questioning. I'd say like 40% of the maps. And that brings me to one of the greatest lessons I learned during this conversation about spectrums, and that is the importance of being comfortable with ambiguity. This map, these spectrums, are simply tools that someone may or may not choose to use during self-reflection and expression. Even after looking at and studying someone's chart, you may not know everything you want to know about them. And that's okay. Whether or not they're trans, what their assigned gender was, who they prefer dating, what their sexual history has been like, these are things that aren't necessarily your business, and you have to be comfortable in that ambiguity. You have to be okay not knowing. What somebody is or is not choosing to share with you now, in this moment, that is what's important. Just like we talked about with question marks, there might be some ambiguity in your own identity. Sometimes I think people are too afraid of gray spaces and we have to know and define everything, but in reality, I think it's actually pretty healthy to accept the fact that we can't know and define everything. Other spectrums people reminded me the existence of are polyamory to monogamy, the spaces between hetero, homo, pan, and aromanticism, and many more. Whew, talked a lot about this topic. Takeaways: lots of things are gray, lots of things are fluid. It's hard, but try to be comfortable with ambiguity, and a person's identity is entirely their own and no one else has the right to label or define them. Yay! Okay, bye! Leave me a comment about stuff and things. Follow me on Twitter.
I've been asked on behalf of Ashley to have you subscribe and like. Pretty please for me, like for me. Please like for me. Pretty please for me, I'll give you fake money.